There are some things that you need to do before you even get onto the edit suite, let alone the grade. And those are having the footage stabilized and making sure that you use ND filters so that you stick to the 180-degree rule in terms of shutter speed, because that's going to make a big difference on the overall quality of your raw footage, and then you will improve it in the grade. But if you start with footage that is well exposed and stable, you've gone a long way already. I'm going to be using DaVinci Resolve Studio, but everything that I'm going to show you works with whatever platform out there. I recommend that you use DaVinci Resolve because you can download it for free and only upgrade to the studio version if you need to. So here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and I have a timeline with some clips. 2 clips of each. One that was shot on auto and no filters, and the same clip that has been shot with an ND filter. And just by simply adding an ND filter, it helps to reduce some of that sharpness that smartphones apply automatically to the footage, because this is the one thing that you're gonna have to be fighting against. Now, there are some basics that you need to know before we go into grading the footage. Your highlights should never go over 1023, and your shadows or blacks should never go below 0. That doesn't mean that you cannot go over 1023 or below 0. As you can clearly see, I have gone in one part of my note tree below 0. But you need to understand why you do that, because this is a creative decision. So for instance, look what happens if I take the brights above 1023. So if I go over 1023, you see, that's clipping. There is no information there. All the clouds are gone and it's just white in the sky. Look at the difference when I keep it under 1023. If I push it, there is always information there. So this is really important so that you can understand the basics of color grading. There are many different ways to go about grading your footage, and there is not one formula that is the one perfect formula and everything else is not valid. We all work in different ways. You just have to find something that works for you. And on the vector scope, you always want to try to make sure that the colors don't leave these boxes. Depending on the saturation, the colors might go up to here, there, but you want to make sure that the colors don't leave sort of a circle here. The default view that I always have is the parade, and this is my note tree. So I go from a footage that looks like this to something that looks like this. But I'm gonna show you the walkthrough because you can change the final look depending on what you want. So first things that I always do is I always do a basic pass. So I've gone from this to this, and all I did was crush the blacks a little bit, as you can clearly see, reduce the overall brightness so that I can see a bit more information there, and I've given it a -10 here on the mids because the iPhone footage and pretty much any smartphone footage is well over sharpened. So to me, it's a little bit off-putting. So I try to reduce that a little bit, and I reduce the warmness a little bit so that it's a little bit more neutral. To me, a smartphone footage is way too contrasty, so I always reduce it to 0.9. After that, I've given it an effect, soften and sharpen, just to reduce that sharpness a little bit, and I've reduced the settings. This is, again, you can clearly see, it's just a tiny bit. Now, the next thing that I have is I add some color, and all I do here is introduce a little bit of color, so that I keep it as 65, just to warm it up a little bit more, give it a little bit more color. And that to me looks good. What I like to do is I usually like to do a lookup table, and I have my own set of LUTs for smartphones, which I'll be leaving a link below if you're interested. And this is as simple as drag and drop based on the look that you want. So I had chosen that one, but I could easily choose a different one. If I reset the node, let's say that we're going through this and we decided that we like this one. I just drag it there. So that's the look. You can go from this to this, and then obviously you can decide whether you want your shadows to be above 0 or not. That's then a creative decision. So you can go from something like that to like that. So again, that's now the lookup table is a creative choice, but that is beginning to look much better than this. In my opinion, that looks really nice. I've saved this tree with all the settings on my gallery so that I can easily adjust access it here. If I have something new, I can just drag this and I have everything there. So this is what it was before and this is after. And to me, that looks much better than this. Look at the difference. This is footage shot with no filters And this is footage that was shot with an ND filter. And you can clearly see that it's a lot less sharp and it's a lot more gentle to the eye. Look at the bridge and the water. It's very neat and it's almost like too aggressive on the eye. Whereas if you use an ND filter, it's all much more subtle. Because what you can do then is you come here, you drag my preset, and look at that. That looks amazing. You've gone from something like this to something like that. And again, this is something that you may not like. You might decide, well, I don't want this look. I want something different. Let's go for Milan. That look. There you go. So that's a different look. And you just got it there. I'm staying within 1023 and 0. Another one, this is footage shot with an ND filter. And this is with no ND filter. And you can clearly see how much sharper the edges are. The ND kind of softens a little bit the edges and it makes it much more pleasant. And again, back to what I did earlier, I just drag and look at that. That looks really nice. You can decide, well, I don't like this LUT and do something that is maybe a little bit more different look. You know, this is what I said to you that you need to be mindful of. You see, I've added this LUT and obviously maybe this is the look that you're going for, but you see this area, the blacks have gone well below 0. So ideally you would want to bring this up. Look how much below 0 they went, okay? Now this might not be a look that you're going for, and obviously maybe you want something like that. But the thing is, if you know the rules, you then can break them easily and decide whether that's okay with you or not. And this is the beauty of LUTs, that you can have all these looks at your disposal and you just drag and drop them and you can change dramatically how a shot looks and feel. Otherwise, you might spend 5 or 10 minutes dialing in all these different settings until you arrive to a look that you're happy with. And this is something that you can easily do with a LUT. You simply just drag and drop and you save yourself a lot of time. This was shot with an ND and you can clearly see that if I was to show you the footage from an iPhone with no ND, look how much sharper everything looks. It's almost upsetting to the eye. Whereas the footage that is with an ND is much more gentle and pleasant to look at. And all I need to do now is come to the gallery, drag my node, and bingo, that's looking very good. You might say, well, that's a bit too colorful on the lookup table. You may not even need the lookup table. Maybe you say, well, I want it to be a little bit brighter. We can raise the mids a little bit more, you know. But you can clearly see, look at the brickwork. Compare the brickwork. I'm gonna switch it on and off, okay? That's off, that's on, that's off, that's on. I just took a little bit of the sharpness. We haven't lost detail. I just took that edge because it's so annoying. And it's just very subtle, minus 0.3, minus 0.2. We've gone from something that was like this to something like this. Now I shoot with Canon cameras and lenses. So when I need to do something on an iPhone that I know that is going to be intercut with a Canon camera, obviously I need to shoot with ND filters, period, because there's absolutely no way I can shoot with no filters and make it look even remotely similar to a Canon camera. Not that you can make it look like a Canon camera, because you can't, but something that is not going to stand out like an ISO. If you're doing talking heads, that's even more difficult, because trying to match or get similar footage from an iPhone with very tiny lenses to full frame or APS-C lenses with very shallow depth of field is really difficult. Now the iPhone has cinematic mode, and that's the one thing that you want to use. So this is Canon footage. This is the raw footage, and this is what it looks like with the gray. This is what the footage looks like. This looks terrible. On cinematic, when you import it onto DaVinci Resolve, it looks terrible. And I'm obviously not a model, but you know, that looks terrible by all means. Now, what you need to do first thing is a color transformation. You open a node, Alt S, and you basically put these settings: input color space DaVinci white gamut, color space Rec 709, and output gamma Rec 2100 HLG. You need to make sure that you, on the gamut mapping method, you put saturation compression, and you can play around with these settings, but more often than not, you find just like that. I then apply a color correction, and this is very basic settings. Depending on every shot is different, but I like to sort of play around a little bit with the gamma and the gain, and Again, I reduce the contrast because to me, this is too much. I prefer a little bit more subtle and gentle. This is a big one that you only get in a studio, but I highly recommend the studio version. If you're gonna do any serious work on grading, it's gonna be a blessing. You can see in this area that there is a little bit of softening, okay? It's softening the face, is not softening anywhere else in the image. I do this because the Canon footage, it's a lot more gentle on the details compared to the footage that comes from an iPhone. It's very aggressive. So I compensate a little bit. And obviously here you can go crazy, you know, you can go like that, and which is, you know, you start to look like Plastic Fantastic. Sometimes I even do like 0.3, like very, very subtle, but it depends. Every shot is different, every lighting condition is different. And then what I do is I select this one and then I command select this one. And then I don't do apply grade, I say shot match to this clip. This is Canon, this is iPhone. It's not as jarring. You can now spend 15 minutes trying to warm this up. Look at that, it's much closer. And if you have just a clip that you need to intercut, well, I'm telling you that a lot of the times people won't notice, because look, the depth of field that you got on the footage. This is an f8. I could probably do f9 or f10 because they haven't quite got the effect perfect just yet. And this is how you make smartphone footage look really nice. Now I have my own set of LUTs for the smartphones so that you can use them with your color grading. That is gonna make your life a lot simpler. I also leave this note tree template so that if you grade on DaVinci Resolve, it's as easy as drag and drop, and it's gonna save you a lot of time. Now, one thing that is really important, that is gonna have a massive impact on not just the way you grade, but also when you export the footage, because you want to make sure that whatever it is that you have on your edit platform, whether it's DaVinci Resolve, Premiere Pro, whatever, that is gonna look exactly the same when you export it and play it up in QuickTime, because YouTube or whatever other social media platform, they will do their encoding, and it's very, very difficult that things will look exactly the same. I like, regardless of what I do, I like to set my color science to YRGB, my timeline color space sRGB, and I leave it like that, okay? That's just me. Now, some purists out there will go absolutely insane, and they will go like, whoa, no, you need to set it this way or that way. Look, I hardly ever have a video where all my footage is iPhone. I have footage that is from my Canon camera, sometimes from my DJI Pocket 2, from my iPhone, from, I can't remember how many cameras. Sometimes I use on a different project, depending on what it is that I do or where I am. So I cannot have a timeline that is just for HDR or just for Canon. I just use a generic one, and I have found that it works really well. Another thing that you need to be mindful of is that if you change the color space, okay, so let's say that you have some HDR footage and you want to work with it. Look, the moment I change this and I press save, look what happens. You know, I change the color space and everything looks completely different. So look what happens when I put it back to sRGB. It's all back to normal. And if I have any HDR footage that is on my timeline, I can just individually change the color space for those rather than affecting every single clip. And this is really important because a lot of the videos that you watch on YouTube, they are based on the fact that your entire timeline is going to be an HDR timeline or whatever other setting. And that's not the case. The important thing as well is that once you've done all your grading, okay, when you set your export settings, you go onto advanced settings, and on the color space tag, you also set it to sRGB and the gamma tag to sRGB, because you could spend hours on your edit and then it turns out that it doesn't look the same as in your edit suite. And then you're gonna start scratching your brains thinking, what the hell have I done wrong? It happened to me before, and I don't want that to happen to you. And I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something from it. If you did, give it a thumbs up because it helps with the YouTube algorithm. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's really nice to see the numbers going up. And I'll see you in the next video.